It was Christmas Eve, and I stood alone on the front porch of my aunt's grand house, holding a bourbon apple pie I had baked from scratch and a bag of carefully wrapped gifts. The cold air nipped at my ankles, but it wasn't the chill that made my skin prickle. I had worn a deep crimson sweater dress, paired with gold earrings and a subtle touch of lipstick, the kind of outfit that said I was trying, but not trying too hard. From inside the house, warm laughter and the clinking of silverware echoed through the frosted windows. For one long moment, I allowed myself to believe I was welcome. Then the door opened. Aunt Valerie stood in the doorway, a silk red dress hugging her frame, her makeup flawless as ever. Her eyes flicked over me without a hint of warmth. Then she rolled her eyes. Not subtly, deliberately, like I was an unwanted solicitor. Her voice came crisp and cold. "You shouldn't have come. We don't want you here." I blinked. The pie shifted slightly in my hands. What? Go ruin someone else's holiday? Julia. Behind her, I saw a glimpse of my family gathered around the table. My mother was pouring wine. My brother Liam leaned over to whisper something to my sister Claire, who was laughing softly. No one looked toward the door. No one knew I was there. Or maybe they did, and it didn't matter. I felt the words forming in my throat, desperate to explain. I was invited. Mom called me. She said it was time to put the past behind us. Valerie's eyes didn't flinch. Miriam made a mistake. We talked afterward and agreed it would be uncomfortable if you came. You understand, don't you? I stood frozen. The gifts in my hand suddenly felt ridiculous. The pie I had been so proud of now seemed like a joke. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Got it. I turned away. I didn't let her see my tears. I walked back down the lantern-lined path, heels crunching softly against the concrete. Behind me, the door clicked shut. Just like that, I was out. Rejected on the doorstep of the family I had spent years trying to win back. My heart pounded like I was being chased. I reached the car, opened the passenger door, and gently placed the pie and gifts on the seat. My phone buzzed. A simple text from Dad. "Merry Christmas, kiddo. Love you." 10 minutes later, headlights lit up the snow. Dad's truck pulled up beside mine. He stepped out fast, eyes searching, voice rising. "Julia? Julia, what happened?" I finally broke. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I sobbed into the freezing air, and everything that had held me together shattered. This Christmas was going to be different. But I hadn't expected it to begin like this. My name is Julia Reeves, and I am 29 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, where I work as an environmental engineer for a small but ambitious sustainability firm. I've always been the kind of person who tries to fix things: rivers polluted with runoff, old buildings leaking energy, relationships teetering on the edge. People say I have my father's stubbornness and my mother's eyes. I wear simple clothes, muted tones, mostly because they help me blend in. I don't like drawing too much attention to myself. But on holidays, especially Christmas, I try harder. I straighten my hair, wear a splash of color, maybe even lipstick. It's not vanity, it's hope. That maybe if I look polished enough, kind enough, successful enough, I'll finally be seen as enough. Growing up, my family always looked picture perfect on the outside. My father, Daniel Reeves, was a civil engineer, meticulous and kind, the type who fixed broken hinges without being asked and remembered the names of your teachers. My mother, Miriam, came from a family obsessed with appearances. Her younger sister, Valerie, was the golden child, the kind who hosted holiday parties with matching place cards and napkin rings. After my parents divorced 5 years ago, that facade cracked beyond repair. The house, the laughter, the traditions, all of it split. Liam, my younger brother by 2 years, chose to stay with Mom and Aunt Valerie, following their world of image and control. Claire, my older sister, always leaned into whatever felt stable. Which at the time meant aligning with Mom's version of events. That left me, caught in the middle. Dad moved out quietly, taking only what he needed. No drama, no accusations. Just space. I was 24 and living on my own by then, finishing graduate school. He would come to my presentations, send supportive texts before interviews, and still remembered to ask about the small things. He never spoke ill of my mother, not once. Not even when it became clear that Aunt Valerie was shaping the narrative around the divorce. Painting Dad as absent, unfaithful, selfish. None of it was true. I knew because I had lived it. But the rest of my family, they chose to believe her. Valerie had always treated me like a problem she couldn't quite fix. She'd make comments at family dinners, snide little jabs dressed as concern. Engineering isn't exactly feminine, Julia. Are you sure you're cut out for that kind of work? Your posture is a bit unsure. You should work on that. Over time, those words burrowed deep. And no matter how many degrees I earned or projects I completed, in her eyes, I was still the girl who refused to pick a more appropriate career. One that didn't remind her of my father. After the divorce, holidays became political terrain. Invitations were selective. Plans changed last minute. One year, I found out the Thanksgiving dinner had happened only through Claire's Instagram. Another year, I sent a gift that was returned unopened. Through it all, Dad remained my steady point. He'd make homemade chili on Christmas Eve, put on old records, and tell stories about bridges he'd worked on. He never pressured me to choose sides. But I knew, deep down, that the rest of them had made their choice. Aunt Valerie's influence over my mother was something I came to understand only gradually. They weren't just close. They were enmeshed. Valerie had strong opinions, and Miriam often adopted them as her own. After the divorce, it was Valerie who accompanied Mom to the lawyer meetings. Valerie who insisted Dad was hiding assets. Valerie who convinced her to push for full control of the family home. She would say things like, "He abandoned you, Miriam. You deserve more." But Dad hadn't abandoned anyone. He left because he was pushed. Over the years, I tried to bridge the gap. I sent my mother birthday flowers every year. I offered to meet for coffee. I invited Liam to come see a sustainability expo I had helped organize. I wrote Claire letters during a tough period when she was jobless and unsure about her future. But most of my efforts were met with vague responses or quiet rejection. Valerie, meanwhile, continued to host perfect holiday gatherings with coordinated themes, where I was never quite invited. Until this year. A week before Christmas, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice sounded uncertain, thinner than I remembered. She said she'd been thinking a lot about the past. That Valerie was hosting again and had agreed it was time for reconciliation. "You should come, Julia. Everyone will be there. Claire wants to see you. Liam too." I hesitated. I asked if Dad would be welcome. She said no, but she hoped I would still join. "Valerie's making her honey-glazed ham. You always liked that." I agreed, cautiously. When I told Dad, he listened quietly, then said, "Just be careful. People don't always change just because we hope they will." I smiled, trying to stay optimistic. Maybe 5 years had softened things. Maybe they missed me too. Dad only nodded. "I'll be here if you need me." The week leading up to Christmas passed in a blur of spreadsheets, blueprint revisions, and holiday deadlines. My firm had been racing to finalize a green housing proposal before the year closed, and I spent most evenings at my desk under the glow of fluorescent lights. Still, I carved out time each night to plan the gifts. I wanted this year to be different. I wanted to believe that maybe, finally, I could be part of the family again. I spent hours selecting each present, personal and intentional. For Mom, I found a restored photo of her with Grandma Lily, taken in 1976. When she still smiled without reservation. For Liam, a customized tool set engraved with his initials. For Claire, a journal made of recycled leather, along with a note telling her how much I admired her resilience. Even for Valerie, I ordered a handcrafted fountain pen and had it engraved with the words, "To New Beginnings, Julia." I knew she loved things with elegance and status, and I wanted this gesture to say I had no desire to fight. Just to be included. 2 days before Christmas, I called Mom to confirm. She sounded warm, even grateful. "We're really glad you're coming, sweetie. Valerie's house looks beautiful. She's going all out." I thanked her, told her I'd bring dessert. That night, I baked the bourbon apple pie using Grandma Lily's old recipe. The scent of cinnamon and whiskey filled my apartment, bringing memories of quiet mornings with Dad and of a time when holidays hadn't meant stress or strategies. On Christmas Day, I spent the morning choosing my outfit. I wanted to look festive but not overdone. I settled on a dark crimson sweater dress that brought out the gold flecks in my eyes. I curled my hair softly around my shoulders, applied subtle makeup, and clasped Grandma's vintage necklace around my neck. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a woman begging to be accepted. I saw someone who had tried. Someone who still hoped. I left around 3. The roads were clear, sunlight bouncing off the snowbanks, and holiday songs played softly on the radio. I hummed along, nervous but optimistic. As I pulled into the neighborhood, I couldn't help but notice the grandeur of Valerie's street. Every home was draped in synchronized lights, and hers was the crown jewel, a Tudor-style mansion glowing gold in every window. I parked behind Claire's silver SUV and sat for a moment to steady my hands. Through the front window, I saw movement, Mom adjusting something on the mantel, Liam walking through with wine glasses, Claire laughing at something someone said. It looked warm. It looked right. I took a breath, lifted the pie carrier in one hand, the gift bag in the other, and walked up the stone path toward the front door. Each step echoed with the sound of hope. I pressed the doorbell. From inside, I heard Westminster chimes followed by soft footsteps. Then the door opened. There stood Aunt Valerie. She wore a red satin dress, her pearls glowing at her collarbone. Her makeup was pristine. She looked at me and tilted her head, as though confused by my presence. Then she narrowed her eyes and sighed dramatically. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "We don't want you here." The words hit like frost against bare skin. For a heartbeat, I stood frozen. Then I glanced past her shoulder. I could see the living room, the fire crackling, the table set with candles, and all of them, my mother, my siblings, laughing, unaware. I swallowed. Mom invited me. We talked last week. Valerie didn't blink. Miriam made a mistake. We talked it over. It would be awkward. We decided it's better this way. I felt something inside me loosen, like a string snapping. You could have called, I managed. Told me not to come. She raised her chin slightly. We assumed you'd get the message. She began to close the door. Got it, I said quietly. I turned and walked back toward my car, each step heavier than the last. I placed the pie and gifts on the passenger seat, slid behind the wheel, and stared blankly through the windshield. The holiday lights blurred through tears I refused to let fall. My hands trembled. I fumbled for my phone. There was a message from Dad. "Merry Christmas, kiddo. Love you." I hit call. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay?" "No. Where are you?" I told him the street. "Stay there," he said. "I'm coming." 15 minutes later, headlights bathed my car in light. I saw the outline of his figure approaching through the frost-covered window. When he opened my door, I couldn't hold it in. I cried, harder than I had in years. They shut the door in my face. I said between sobs. Valerie said they talked after Mom invited me and decided it would be too awkward. Dad's face darkened, jaw tight. "Where are your gifts?" "Still here." He looked at the passenger seat, then back at me. "You don't deserve this, Julia. You never did." "I know," I whispered. But I still went. I thought maybe. He rested a hand on my shoulder. "It's time to stop hoping they'll do right by you. And start doing right by yourself." I nodded, wiping my eyes. He pulled out his phone and stepped away. "I need to make a call," he said. I watched him pace, his voice low but sharp, like I hadn't heard in years. When he returned, he opened the car door and looked me straight in the eye. "Get your things. We're going back." "Back?" I whispered. "To Valerie's?" "Yes. This ends tonight." I hesitated, staring at Dad as if he had spoken a language I didn't understand. Back? The thought alone made my stomach twist. I had already endured the humiliation once. Going back felt like volunteering for a second blow. But Dad's eyes didn't waver. He wasn't angry. He was resolved, like something inside him had finally snapped into place. I took a deep breath and nodded. If he was willing to walk back into that house with me, maybe I could too. We transferred the pie and the gift bag into his truck. As I fastened my seatbelt, I looked down at the pen I had bought for Valerie. "To New Beginnings." The engraving shimmered in the soft interior light. The irony cut deep. The ride back was silent. Valerie's house came back into view. Warm lights glowing like nothing had happened, like I hadn't been turned away like a stray dog. Dad parked across the street. He turned off the engine and looked at me. "Ready?" I wasn't, but I nodded. We walked across the street. Dad's steps were firm, steady. Mine were slow. The snow beneath our feet had hardened into a quiet crunch. When we reached the door, he didn't wait. He raised his fist and knocked sharply, 3 times. hard enough to make the wreath rattle. The door opened faster than I expected. Valerie again. Her expression shifted from smug to startled in less than a second. Her gaze moved from me to Dad and narrowed. Daniel, what are you doing here? This is a private gathering. Exactly, he said calmly. That's why Julia should be here. Because she's part of this family. Valerie's eyes flicked to me and back to him. I think you both should leave before this becomes a scene. Dad stepped forward, not aggressively, but with a quiet authority I hadn't seen in years. Or what, Valerie? You'll slam the door again? This time in front of witnesses? His voice carried into the house. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. My mother appeared, wine glass in hand, brows knitting as she saw us. Daniel? Julia? Valerie turned to block her. They were just leaving. Actually, Dad said, raising his voice. We're here because your sister turned Julia away after you invited her. Mom blinked, clearly confused. What? I set a place for her. She looked past Valerie at me, genuinely startled. You were supposed to come. I asked you to. Valerie turned to her, tone suddenly tight. We discussed it after. I explained it would be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Mom echoed. Behind her, Claire appeared, holding a glass of cider. Then Liam. Then silence. The entire living room was quiet. Everyone was listening now. Dad's voice remained steady. She told Julia we don't want you here. That's a direct quote. After Julia drove across town, brought gifts, and made dessert. Valerie scoffed. I was protecting the peace. Julia's always stirring tension. Her loyalty to you, she turned to Dad, is a disruption. I stepped forward, my voice trembling but firm. I've spent 5 years trying to stay connected. I called. I sent letters. I showed up when no one else did. Valerie cut me out because I didn't cut him out. Claire looked at Valerie, uncertain. Aunt Valerie, is this true? Valerie's jaw clenched. I only said what needed to be said. You said I wasn't wanted, I repeated. Not just by you. You said the family agreed. That they talked after Mom invited me. That I should ruin someone else's holiday. Amber's eyes went wide. That's what she said? I had no idea. Mom's face drained of color. I didn't know. I swear to you, Julia. I never agreed to that. Dad took a breath. I've kept quiet for years. Out of respect. But I'm not going to let this happen again. Valerie has twisted every narrative to paint me as a villain. She did it during the divorce. She's doing it now. Claire stepped closer to me. You brought gifts? She looked down at the pie carrier. You made apple bourbon? I nodded. Grandma's recipe. Mom looked stunned. That was always your favorite. I thought it was too rich, but... Valerie convinced you it was unhealthy, Dad said, his tone dry. Liam suddenly pulled out his phone. He scrolled rapidly, then paused. 3 years ago. He turned the screen to Claire. Look. A message from Dad, asking what time my graduation started. I never saw this. I was using your old phone that month, Claire said slowly. Remember? Mine was in the shop. A wave of realization passed through her face. You read it, didn't you? She looked at Valerie. You saw that message and didn't say anything. Valerie's eyes darted, calculating. I didn't want to give him false hope, she said coolly. You let me believe he just didn't care, Liam said. You let me sit there, thinking my father didn't show up because he didn't love me enough. My hands were trembling again. Not from fear, from anger. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the sealed envelope containing the printed copies of emails I had sent. The ones that were never answered. The notes returned. The ones I had saved as proof for myself when I began to wonder if I had imagined everything. I handed them to my mother. She took them slowly, flipping through each page. Her face changed as she read, color draining, hand beginning to shake. How did I not see this? Because you trusted her, I said quietly. Like I did. Until tonight. The room had fallen silent, thick with a tension that felt like a held breath. My mother's eyes were scanning the pages I'd handed her, emails I had written over the past 5 years. Notes inviting her for coffee, updates from college, photos she never responded to. She gripped one of the papers a little too hard, the edge crumpling under her fingers. When she finally looked up, her voice was low and stunned. I never saw any of this. I thought you stopped trying. I never did, I whispered. I kept writing even when no one answered. Because I still believed in us. Claire, now visibly pale, took the envelope from Mom's hands and looked through it herself. She frowned, then glanced over at Valerie. Why would you hide this from us? Valerie straightened, trying to reclaim control. I did what I thought was best for everyone. Julia was clearly siding with Daniel. She refused to acknowledge how much he hurt Miriam. She was a disruptive presence. Mom finally spoke, and this time there was steel in her voice. No, Valerie. She was my daughter. And you kept her from me. Valerie's composure cracked. Her voice rose, brittle with emotion. I was protecting you, Miriam. After everything he put you through. He abandoned us. He destroyed the life we built. Dad stepped forward, calm and clear. I never abandoned anyone. I moved out because you asked me to, after Valerie insisted I was having affairs that never existed. I offered to show you everything, travel itineraries, receipts from work trips. But you didn't want to see them. Because Valerie told you they were forged. Mom turned slowly to Valerie, eyes sharp. You told me you had proof. Valerie hesitated. Business trips, hotel records. He was always gone. It didn't add up. It added up perfectly, Dad said. I was managing an infrastructure project in Reno. Every hotel, every expense, every hour was documented. You made sure none of that ever reached Miriam. Amber, who had been silent the entire time, suddenly looked up from her spot on the staircase. Is that why you always intercepted his letters to me? Aunt Valerie, you told me they were manipulative, that I shouldn't read them. Dad's face changed. I wrote to you every week for a year, Amber. When I never heard back, I thought you were angry. That maybe you needed space. But I never stopped trying. Amber's voice broke. I never saw a single letter. Valerie stepped back, eyes darting between us like someone realizing her control was slipping for good. I was protecting the family. He was poisoning all of you. And Julia never defended us. She just smiled and showed up with her perfect little projects and her self-righteous attitude. Like she was above it all. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but strong. I wasn't above anything. I just didn't want to fight. I wanted peace. I wanted family. I wanted to be seen. Valerie scoffed. You chose him. You made your side clear. No, I said, and my voice rose with every word. I chose truth. I chose love. And if choosing not to erase my father means I lose everyone else, then maybe I was never part of this family to begin with. Claire looked at me then, eyes softer than they had been in years. I didn't know, she said. None of us did. You weren't supposed to, I replied. That was always the plan. Divide and isolate. Paint a villain. Rewrite history. Liam turned toward Mom, his voice uncertain. What do we do now? There was a long silence before Mom took a breath and said the words I never thought I'd hear from her. Valerie, I want you to leave. Valerie blinked. What? You've lived here rent-free since your divorce. I let you stay because I thought you were helping me. But you weren't. You were controlling me. You were deciding which of my children I got to love. You can't be serious. I am. Claire stepped beside Mom. So am I. You told me Dad forgot my graduation. You never even asked if I wanted to invite him. Amber joined them. You kept his letters from me. Valerie's voice wavered. I gave everything to this family. I was there when no one else was. I helped you through the worst. You caused the worst, Mom said quietly. And now it's time to go. Valerie looked around the room, hoping for someone, anyone, to step in. But no one moved. Her shoulders stiffened. You're all making a mistake. No, I said. We're finally fixing one. She grabbed her coat from the rack, her designer heels clicking sharply against the tile. As she opened the door, she turned back to me, her eyes cold. Don't come crawling back when he disappoints you again. He never has, I replied. She slammed the door behind her. The silence that followed felt enormous. But in that silence, there was no fear. No tension. Just the collective realization that something enormous had ended, and something else, long buried, was beginning. The door slammed shut, and for a moment, no one moved. The silence hung like thick fog, not heavy with shame but with something newer, more unfamiliar, relief. Then Amber let out a shaky laugh. It wasn't loud or mocking, just soft and incredulous. She looked down at the pie carrier I still held. You brought bourbon apple pie. Valerie's allergic to bourbon. It was true. I hadn't even thought about that. I smiled despite myself, the absurdity cracking the tension. Claire started laughing too, then Liam. Mom shook her head and smiled, pressing a hand to her forehead. It was the kind of laughter that comes not from humor but from release, from the breaking of something that had been too tight for too long. When it faded, Mom looked around the room, her eyes softening. "We can't eat here," she said. "Not now. This house doesn't feel like ours anymore." "It was never ours," I said. "It was always hers." Dad cleared his throat. "My place isn't much, but I've got a tree up, and I think there's lasagna left in the freezer. We could picnic like we used to during storms." Claire raised her hand. "I'll bring the cranberry sauce." Liam nodded. "I'll carry the wine." Mom turned to me. "Would you be okay with that? Moving this elsewhere?" I looked at all of them, my family, not perfect, not healed, but finally present. "Yes, let's leave." It was strange, how quickly we moved. Dishes were covered, wine bottles packed into tote bags. Amber collected the wrapped gifts from beneath the tree, and Claire found the bag I had left earlier, still untouched, sitting near the hallway bench. She handed it to me. "These should be opened tonight. It's time." Within 20 minutes, we were outside, standing on the snow-covered driveway. Mom looked back at the house, her arms crossed tightly. "I've let her control me since we were children," she said softly. "This feels like waking up." I reached out and gently touched her arm. "It won't be easy. Valerie won't disappear. She may try to come back. She probably already is," Mom said. "But she'll never hold this power again." We drove in 2 cars to Dad's apartment in the center of town. The building wasn't impressive, but it had warmth. A small tree twinkled in the corner of the living room. The table was mismatched, the plates chipped, but everything about it felt grounded. We laid out food on paper towels. Mom sat cross-legged on the rug. Claire poured wine into coffee mugs. Amber dimmed the lights. It wasn't the Christmas I expected, but it was the Christmas I needed. After we ate, I passed out the gifts. They were simple but deliberate. Each one met with genuine thanks. Amber handed me something wrapped in old sketch paper. Inside was a hand-illustrated journal, drawings of childhood memories, pages blank in the middle, and then a picture of 2 grown women, me and her, bridging the gap. "I made this last year," she said. "But I didn't know if I'd ever get to give it to you." Claire held the leather journal I had given her like it was a rare artifact. Liam admired the engraving on the tool set, saying he couldn't wait to use it. Mom unwrapped the restored photo and gasped. "This was taken at that fairground in Astoria. I thought it was lost." "Dad saved it," I said. "He saved everything." She looked up slowly. "I never deserved him, did I?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She nodded to herself. "I want to find my own place. I can't stay in that house." Claire and Liam both offered to help her move. "I'll pack tomorrow," Mom said. "I'll find something near the college. I've already sent in my application to teach again. I've wanted that for a long time." It wasn't a full repair. There were still cracks, bruises beneath the surface. But something stronger than regret had taken root. Something called choice. We had chosen to be here tonight. Chosen each other. Not because we were obligated. Because we were done letting someone else define our family. 6 months passed since that night, and our lives slowly rearranged themselves into something unfamiliar but honest. There were no fireworks, no sweeping reunions, no magical erasure of pain. Just daily choices. Conversations that were once awkward but necessary. Calls that used to end quickly now lingered a little longer. Mom found a small sunlit apartment a few blocks from the college. She got the teaching position and now spends her mornings discussing literature with students who remind her why she once believed in stories. She started to wear colors again. I saw yellow in her wardrobe for the first time in years. She says it feels like waking up from a long, polite sleep. Claire took up photography, something she abandoned after high school when Valerie called it a waste of time. Now she carries a camera everywhere, capturing images of city parks, late-night diners, and sometimes, quietly, our family. Liam moved out, too. Found a studio above a repair shop and started fixing motorcycles in his free time. He says it's therapy for his hands. We don't talk about Valerie much. Not because we're avoiding her, but because we don't need to. She still tries, here and there. A birthday card for Amber, a message to Mom asking if we can be civil again. But the difference now is clarity. No one feels guilt for ignoring her. No one explains their distance. Dad remains the anchor. The quiet, steady presence who never asked to be praised but earned our loyalty by never withdrawing it. He and Mom are not together and never will be again. But they sit across from each other now without the bitter distance. They share parenting advice, old memories, even the occasional joke. The damage Valerie left behind was real. But the healing that followed wasn't just repair. It was reconstruction. As for me, I've stopped chasing approval. I stopped writing messages that go unanswered. I've let go of the belief that peace is earned by silence. I returned to my job with a clarity I hadn't had in years. I designed a sustainable community plan that was chosen for city implementation this spring. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, for having opinions, for being too aligned with my father, or too ambitious, or too emotional. I also made room for someone new. Kyle, my coworker and now partner, who saw the messy parts of my life and never once blinked. He helped me refinish an old kitchen table I bought at a flea market. We sanded it for hours, then painted it in deep walnut. The first meal I served there wasn't extravagant. Just soup and fresh bread. But my family filled every seat. Amber showed her new paintings. Claire brought photos. Mom brought wine. Dad fixed the wobbly leg without being asked. We passed dishes like old times, but better. Because this time, we were here by choice. Looking around that table, I realized something that still echoes through me. Sometimes you spend years trying to earn your seat in a place that was never built to include you. You tell yourself that if you're kinder, quieter, more successful, more forgiving, they'll finally make room. But the truth is, some doors are designed to stay closed. And some tables are never meant to be sat at. That night 6 months ago, I stood on Valerie's doorstep with a pie and a heart full of hope. She closed the door, and in doing so, gave me the freedom to build my own. It's not perfect, but it's real. There's no script, no manipulation, no role to play, just the kind of messy, loud, earnest love that only exists where people are willing to be fully seen. To anyone who feels they are standing in the cold, hoping for the warmth of inclusion, hear me now. You are not the problem. You are not too much. Or not enough. Sometimes walking away is the most honest thing you can do. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in peace. Because your place isn't out there on someone else's porch. It's here, at your own table. With people who never make you question whether you belong. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not knocking again. The door is behind me. And the table in front of me is full. Finally.